Day, plenty of both. Here we go.
Where Colin was right.
Kyler Murray, quarterback Arizona, not expected to play for the Cardinals without a new contract, and we predicted this. We said unlike Dak or Tom Brady or Russell Wilson, he is more self-centered. He's more of a me guy. He will hold out, and Arizona will absolutely be trapped. Now, I would pay him because you have to. But, you know, when you draft quarterbacks, there's a reason they sit down for these long interviews, is because you can really, as an organization, find yourself kind of marginalized. In Arizona right now, he wants to get paid early, and they don't want to pay him because they have a roster with some talented, expensive players. But we said this is the kind of personality he will hold out, and reportedly he is.
Where Colin was wrong.
I picked the Nets over the Celtics. I was almost not outraged, but surprised that the fans got into Kyrie Irving's head, and also that Boston forced so many turnovers and forced KD into a really kind of bad, suboptimal performance. I don't really buy the Celtics as a championship team. I think if Jason Tatum has an off night, they're sunk. But they play real defense. They play team defense. Their ball movement's excellent on the offensive side of the floor, and they gave the best player arguably in the game real trouble in KD.
Where Colin was right.
Even looking for a new job, Baker Mayfield could not help himself. He did a rambling, off-the-cuff podcast with a friend in which there was too much blame and not enough accountability. You know, I've said this before. I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's a bad guy at all. I think he has a bad personality for a franchise quarterback. It's not the cockiness, it's the inability, it's the insecurity from the chip on his shoulder to sometimes fall on the sword and just not say what you're thinking. He's like a linebacker playing quarterback. The interview was too long, a little bit too much victimhood. Should have been 20 minutes. Do it with a pro, get in, get out, and act like you want to correct mistakes and you're hungry for another opportunity. He's too talented to literally have no market. And this morning, he has no market.
Where Colin was wrong.
My feisty Clippers. I said, watch out. They're going to get into the playoffs through the play-in door, and they're going to be a handful, and they couldn't even win a play-in game. T-Wolves, Pelicans both beat them. Now, the Pelicans, Paul George wasn't available due to COVID, which is remarkable that he wasn't, staying out of any possibility of getting that. I like their coach. I like their roster. They've got a lot of different ways to play a bunch of players I like, but the owner, Steve Ballmer, has to be livid. He spent a fortune on this team. They can't get healthy. They don't communicate particularly well, and they have massively underachieved at the time that the Lakers are a mess. So the market's just there to be seized by the basketball fanatic Steve Ballmer, and once again, swing and a miss.
Where Colin was right.
I like me some Derek Carr more than fans do. He got a 3-year extension by the Raiders. It's absolutely the right move. There's 12 quarterbacks in this league, in my opinion, that are good enough to win a Super Bowl. He's one of them. Last year, coaching chaos, Henry Ruggs situation, behind a bad O-line. He completed 68% of his throws, had 4,800 yards, and a mid-90s passer rating with an interim head coach in one of the toughest divisions in football. I don't know what it is, but his ability over the last couple of years to just overcome dysfunction, coaching dysfunction, roster messes, bad O-lines, GM dysfunction is something that very few guys in this league can do, and he does it over and over again.
Where Colin was wrong.
Well, I had the Cavs, like the Clippers, as one of my surprise teams. I didn't think they'd win a playoff series, but I really, really like their future. But you know what? They couldn't stop Trae Young, and they couldn't stop Kyrie Irving. And young teams are often not very good defensive teams. They got energy, and they got talent, and they got speed, but they don't defend at the highest level, the physicality. And the Cavs right now, they just couldn't stop a couple of great players. But boy, what a future they have. Darius Garland, Mobley, Sexton comes back. Jared Allen wasn't healthy for the play-in games. But I thought they'd get in and play Miami and ultimately lose, but they couldn't even make it in.
Where Colin was right.
A report by Tom Silverstein, a very good reporter, said Green Bay is now taking calls on quarterback Jordan Love. He lacks some leadership qualities, which when Aaron Rodgers was out and came back, they were discouraged. Listen, I said it in the offseason. Packers are telling us he's a miss. Because you think they like being called out by Aaron Rodgers? You think they like paying Aaron Rodgers $50 million a year? They would cut the cord with Aaron Rodgers tomorrow if he was a B-plus quarterback. A B. They're telling you it's a miss. And we saw it against Kansas City. I got nothing against the kid. I hope he succeeds. But Green Bay is literally at wit's end with Aaron Rodgers. They can't move around, no flexibility because of his contract. Congrats on the Sammy Watkins deal. He's pretty much washed. But in the end, Tom Silverstein reporting, they're discouraged with him, don't see what they thought, and they're taking calls.
Where Colin was right?
Over 3 million people, at one point 3.5 million people, watched the USFL this weekend on Fox and NBC. I think spring football is going to work. COVID knocked out the previous attempt. I've been wrong twice so far. But I will say this. There's more good quarterbacks than ever. Quarterback play is the difference between watching pro football and not watching pro football, and I think it's going to work. I think the game is fun. I think gambling is legal in America. That's a big part of it. And right now, what is there? For the next 6 weeks, first and second round NBA playoffs. College basketball is done, college football, NFL. There's not a ton out there. There's a couple of early round playoff series. This is the time for a new sports league to flourish, and I think it's going to work. It's got some money behind it now with Fox and NBC. I'm a fan of spring football, though I've been wrong twice, so congrats to the USFL. With that, my friend Olin Polynice, 15 years in the NBA. He knows all about playoff basketball, had 6 in the league since the early 90s. So I was saying, if you want to be a villain, that's fine. I mean, in wrestling, you had Roddy Piper was a wrestling heel. That's, the greatest wrestling heel ever. I'm all for it. But if you choose that, there is shrapnel with it. And, KD left a great culture, and Kyrie has been difficult, anti-vax. And it's funny, I said they're succeeding almost despite themselves. What did you make of the Kyrie sort of meltdown with the fans, or was it a meltdown to you?
No, I don't know that it was a meltdown. I think it was up to character. I mean, look, he had issues and has had exchanges with the fans in Cleveland. This is not the first time that he's had an exchange with the fans in Boston. What I don't understand is, and it gets to sort of your villain theme, is, Kyrie, if you want to be a villain, be a villain. Embrace being a villain. KD, same thing. What is off-putting or confusing is that they don't see themselves as villains. Or when Kyrie's like, hey, you know what, I'm not going to take that, and I'm going to look them right in the eye, and I'm going to give it right back to them. And I'm like, okay, well, then what is giving them the double bird behind your head without turning around? What is that? That's not villainous. That's like the Home Alone villains. Like it's Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern. Like, you got all these tricks that you're trying to pull, and you're not quite pulling them off. And that's the other part. If you're going to be a villain, you have to win, and you have to win pretty consistently. And that's where Kyrie and KD are coming up short. They don't really scare you as villains. I don't know that the Boston Celtics fans, particularly after Game 1, are looking at this and going, oh, man, we better not give it to Kyrie again. We better not get his feathers ruffled, because we could end up, not losing the game. So I would expect there's going to be more here. But Kyrie confuses me. On one point, he says, wants to tell us he's enlightened and he's all about the common man, and then he gets in the gutter with the lowest common denominator, and that doesn't equate with the way Kyrie, I think, the way he wants us to perceive him overall as a human being.
So the Warriors are interesting. I compared them to the LA Rams in that smart GM, smart culture, smart head coach, and they just make a bunch of stuff work. They draft and develop. Clay's off an injury. Steph can come off the bench. Jordan Poole was a 28th pick in the draft. Draymond's better this year than last. And everything just kind of works. But It is an expensive team. It is an older team. Clay's coming off an injury, and Phoenix is rolling. You're somebody in the Bay Area that sees them. You tend to be probably more critical than most of us because you see the warts. Now they look great this weekend, but what do you make of their small lineups? What do you make of this whole operation right now?
Well, one, the reason for that culture and the heart of it is the chemistry and the coming up together of Draymond and Clay and Steph. And that has just infused everyone else who comes into that organization. And Steph coming off the bench is much like Greg Popovich, and the way Steve Kerr bringing Steph off the bench is much like the way Greg Popovich would handle Tim Duncan. And he would do things and you'd think, well, you can't treat a star like that. And yet it set the example that, no, first and foremost, we're going to do what's best for the team. Now, you talked about the warts and you talked about how good they looked in game one. You're right. What I saw was that Steph Curry is not anywhere close to 100%, and that Klay Thompson is not the same. And ultimately, it did not matter because of the job that they did collectively, particularly defensively. They came into this game and said, you're going to have to